كان عمري 11 سنة لما اشتغلت. طبعا أبوي ما كان عنده إمكانيات إنه يدرسني أو إني أكمل. شايف الآن حسيت إذا أعتمد على نفسي وبدرس إخواني بدي يصيروا من المرحلة اللي مشيت فيها أنا. هاي نقطة البداية إن شاء الله، بداية موفقة وإن شاء الله إن المشروع أكبر أكثر من هيك وأفتح فرص عمل للشباب اللي ما بتشتغل أو شيء زي هيك.
فقدت ابنتي البصر بعد 6 أشهر من ولادتها عندما كنا في الكوت ديفوار. حاولنا علاجها من دون جدوى. تواصل زوجي مع أخيه والذي طلب منا العودة إلى بوركينا فاسو، حيث علمنا أن هنالك حملة طبية ينسقها البنك لعلاج هذه الحالات، وتمت الموافقة على علاج أناستازيا وأجريت لها العملية بنجاح. والآن ابنتي تبصر بشكل ممتاز والحمد لله. شكراً لمن كانوا وراء تنظيم هذه الحملة.
As the world moves forward, new solutions are needed to combat poverty. IDB, the Islamic Development Bank, invites you to join us at our 41st annual meeting to explore new ways of improving lives. This year, participants travel to remarkable Indonesia, a stunning archipelago of 17,000 islands and home to 260 million people with a diverse culture and a booming economy. The capital city, Jakarta, plays host to this important international event, where government ministers and senior bank officials from the IDB's 56 member countries join together with hundreds of policymakers and members of international partner institutions to focus on one goal: to enhance growth and alleviate poverty through infrastructure development and financial inclusion. In addition to more than 30 informative seminars and meetings, this year's annual meeting features a major exhibition showcasing innovation and the latest solutions to today's challenges.
Come to Jakarta and share your experience. Together we can explore innovations,
develop partnerships and strengthen cooperation. In remarkable
Indonesia.
the
First IDB annual meeting.
May 15th through 19th, 2016, Jakarta, Indonesia. Please visit the IDB Group annual meeting website.
Islamic Finance Country Reports. Islamic Finance Country Reports, a unique series of insightful and comprehensive reports taking a holistic view of the Islamic financial sector of a country. While charting the evolution of Islamic finance, its successes and progress, the main purpose of the IFCRs is to look into the future potentiality, challenges, and opportunities in this emerging and most dynamic sector of the economy. The reports are produced through a strategic collaboration between three leading world-class institutions: the Islamic Research and Training Institute of the Islamic Development Bank Group, the General Council for Islamic Banks and Financial Institutions, and Thomson Reuters. Beyond simply reporting the state of Islamic finance in a country, the IFCR also aims to galvanize and support further development of the industry. Its main users include local and foreign investors, financial institutions, government agencies, policymakers, researchers, and academic institutions. IFCRs have become a reference point on the state of the Islamic economy for many countries. Since the launch of the maiden edition, the Tunisia IFCR, in June 2013, for subsequent issues of the Islamic Finance Country Report have so far been produced on Turkey, Morocco, Oman, Malaysia, Kazakhstan, Sudan, and now Indonesia. This edition of the IFCR is made possible with the support of Southeast Asia's premier financial institution, CIMB Islamic. It is by far the most in-depth IFCR yet, focusing on one of the leading lights and bastions of Islamic finance. Indonesia stands unique for its leadership and the pioneering role it has assumed to champion Islamic finance. With more than 88% Muslim population, endowed with vast natural resources and strategic geographic location, offers great...
As the world moves forward, new solutions are needed to combat
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to the World's Annual Islamic Finance Conference 2016. It's very nice to see all of you back again, and we hope you have a pleasant time at the conference so far. And now we are moving to the next panel. In this panel session, information about Sukuk issuance for infrastructure financing will be delivered. And the discussion chair of this panel is Dr. Halim Alamsyah. He is the chairman of Indonesia Deposit Insurance Corporation. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite to the stage Dr. Halim Alamsyah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this third session of this conference. The topic for this session is Sukuk issuance for infrastructure financing, focusing on countries' experiences in issuing Sukuk to finance infrastructure projects. We will have three distinguished speakers that will give their experiences in issuing Sukuk to finance infrastructure projects. But first of all, I would like to give you some, let's say, background information that having adequate infrastructures as one of the keys to support high economic growth, promote equal distribution of economic development, and reduce unemployment is, of course, really very critical for any countries. So establishing sufficient infrastructures in place is necessity to most OIC member countries, as most of these countries, just like Indonesia, are still in a developing stages. Because promoting more infrastructure projects requires a lot of financing, then one of the avenue to equip ourselves with adequate infrastructures is by issuing sovereign bond. And this morning we have already heard from many speakers, including during the welcoming remark by the Minister of Finance of Indonesia, that there was a significant innovation and developments in Sukuk infrastructures. And I think the topic that we are going to hear from each of these distinguished speakers will be very important for us. Sukuk, as we know, is not only attractive for Muslims, but also for non-Muslims, especially, to investors that would like to have high returns, low risk, and as well as making sure that the investments that they make will be in good hands. So Sukuk has become more suitable, especially to finance infrastructures in the last several years. According to the World Bank, developing countries spend about $1 trillion US dollar a year on infrastructures, and an additional 1 to 1.5 trillion US dollar will be needed through 2020 to finance infrastructure projects such as water, power and transportation projects, etc. And according to the International Finance Corporation, this institution estimated that a total of 21 trillion US dollar will be needed to finance infrastructure projects during 2008-2018. So Indonesia, Malaysia, and other OIC members have started utilize Sukuk for infrastructure financing. In Indonesia, I think Indonesia has issued what we call project-based Sukuk, and the amount has reached $5.9 billion US dollar. And I think one of the speakers Mr. Isa Rahmatarwata will explain to you further about this. And this proportion of project-based sukuk in Indonesia is already 3.5% of total all government securities. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our speakers. The first speakers, well, I will offer him the first chance to speak, but we'll decide later. The first speaker is Assistant to Minister of Finance, Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Isa Rahmatawarta. He was born in Jombang, 1966. I will not disclose the exact date. He earned his bachelor degree in mathematics from Institute Technology Bandung in 1990 and obtained Master of Mathematics in Actuarial Science degree from University of Waterloo, Canada in 1994. He started his career in pension supervision area at the Director General of Financial Institutions, Minister of Finance in 1991. He is now also Board of Executive Directors of Islamic Development Bank, representing Brunei Darussalam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Suriname. He has been serving a lot of distinguished and also important positions, and I believe he will be a very well-known and also competent speaker. I would like to ask Mr. Isa Rahmatawata to come on the stage. Thank you. Please give applause for him. Thank you, Kawan. And our second speaker, Datuk Nuriza Hajah Abdul Hamid. She is currently Managing Director of Plus Expressway Berhad. Sorry. She has been in this post since the 1st of April 2007. Prior to this position, she was the Managing Director of Faber Group Berhad and Managing Director for Faber Hotels Holdings Sedan Berhad. Currently, she also sits on the Board of Directors of several companies such as LPUS BKSP Toll Limited, Indu Navayuga Infra Project Private Limited, and Jetpur Somnath Tollways Limited. She is also the Executive Director of Expressway Lingkaran Tengah SDN Berhad, Linkadua Malaysia Berhad, and Plus Helicopter Services SDN Berhad. I'm really sorry. She holds a master's degree in business administration, majoring in finance and management, and a Bachelor of Science degree in business administration from Central Michigan University, United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Datuk Nuriza Hajah Abdul Hamid. And our third speaker is one of the most recognized and also awarded legal professionals in the Islamic financial service industry. He was a member of the UK Treasury Committee of Islamic Finance Experts, a member of the FSA Committee on Islamic Finance, and worked closely with the Muslim Council of Britain and other bodies to promote and develop Islamic finance in the UK. In January 2005, he was nominated as one of the Hot 100 by the Lawyer in recognition of his work in developing market-leading Islamic finance practice. In July 2009, his contribution to the development of Islamic finance was acknowledged by the organizers of the ICG Sukuk Summit Awards with an award for his outstanding contribution to Islamic finance in UK. He is also advising His Majesty Treasury UK on the Her Majesty Treasury, UK on the legal aspect of issuing a Sukuk under the T-bill issuance procedures of the Debt Management Office. In addition to his professional experience, our third speaker is also a regular speaker in numerous international conferences and seminars on Islamic finance. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Neil De Miller. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have the three speakers on stage. I would like to give the floor first to Mr. Isa, if you don't mind. You will have about 20 minutes presentation. Yeah? Well, it depends on you. If you want to be shorter, then of course, please. And then we will have all the speakers will do also the presentation first. Later on, we will have the Q&A. Pak Isa, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bapak Halim Alamsyah, thank you very much for your very kind introduction. It's longer than what was displayed in the screen. Thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, in this third session, I will start my presentation by stating that the Indonesian government is really committed to improve its performance in the development area, to improve several things. Of course, the ultimate goal is to improve the well-being of the people of Indonesia. And we are still now trying very hard to improve the many conditions in many areas to ensure that the development is really escalating, because we believe that with the current stage of speed of development, it's not enough. We will not be able to achieve the welfare of the people in a short time with this speed of development. And we have used many indicators, many monitoring tools to check whether we are on the right direction or not. So one of the tools that we are using is to see the Indonesian rank in the Global Competitiveness Index. Let me start with this slide. As we can see, the Indonesian position in the Global Competitiveness Index is improving from year to year. In the 2014-2015 index, we rank number 34. Yet, this is not enough to attract more investment to come to Indonesia. And when we go into the detail of this index, we will see some factors that show our weaknesses. One of them is the availability of the infrastructure for doing business. And this is this factor, rank number 5, that create some disadvantage when we compare Indonesia to other peers, to other countries. We see here, number 5 is infrastructure, the supply of infrastructure. We rank number 72 in the availability of infrastructure if we go into the detail of the Global Competitiveness Index. And if we go into more detail, we will see that some factors like roads, railways, ports, air transportation, electricity, mobile fixed line communication, mobile communication, we rank number somewhere above 50. This is something that we really want to improve in the near future, and that is one of the reasons why the current government really put serious attention to improve this, not just to make the rank escalating, but really to have the infrastructure available for those who are interested doing business in Indonesia. So this is I will start from this. This shows that Indonesia needs more infrastructure to make Indonesia is more competitive. So the government has evaluated and decides to put more efforts to develop infrastructure in many areas, in many sectors. This is the thing that we plan to develop in the next 5 years since 2015. So between 2015 and 2019, we expect to invest more than 5,500 trillion rupiah in the area of infrastructure. We want to build more than 2,600 kilometers roads. We want to build more than 1,000 kilometer toll roads. We want to build new airports, 50 new airports, 6 airport upgrading. We want to build sea harbors, more than 60 sea harbors we plan to build, and many other infrastructure units that we want to achieve in the next 4 years from now. It's 5 years from 2015. Not only in the cities, in the big cities, but also in the very far area in the east of Indonesia, where we currently see a very limited number of infrastructure units now we are planning to really build. So once again, this will need a very huge amount of money to invest in the infrastructure. How we will finance this 5,500 trillion rupiahs in the next 5 years? This is about our planning or our estimation on how we expect to get the money from. We think we can allocate more than 2,200 trillion from our central government budget, and we expect to have about 545 trillion from the regional government budget. And then from the state-owned enterprises, we also expect them to be able to raise fund for the infrastructure more than 1,000 trillion rupiah. About 1,690 trillion we expect from the private sector. This is the allocation that we expect we can raise in the next 5 years. Of course, you can see in this slide the detail on how we will allocate this 5,500 trillion in some infrastructure areas. We will see that we also expect quite huge amount from the private sector. Yet, so far we see that the majority of the financing comes from banking. This is something that should be really reviewed and then improved, because at this current stage, we will see that even the banks in Indonesia, the banks from foreign countries, all together do not really satisfy the needs for infrastructure financing. The majority of the financing by banks only supply 5% of the needs of a project. So 34% financing from banks, from the consortium of banks give a financing less than 5% of a total project. And if we check further, those consortium of banks that can supply more than 20% of the financing of the project, an infrastructure project, only accounts for 8% of the total financing from the banks or the consortium of banks. So it means that the biggest source of private financing, which is in Indonesia currently, is banking, do not really satisfy the needs for infrastructure financing from the private sector. So this makes us look at and rely on other sources. This is something, some very important reason why we have to look at other mode of financing. Of course, Sukuk is one of the mode of financing that we are interested in. There are several reasons why Sukuk is important. Of course, one, it has a larger market as it targets both Sharia and conventional investors, and there will be no bubble as all Sukuk issuance are backed by certain assets. The most proper instrument for infrastructure financing as its underlying is the project itself. So I will skip some slides. Indonesia has experience in issuing sukuks. The Indonesian government currently is the biggest sukuk issuance in the country. It starts in 2008, but we can see here in the timeline, we have so many experiences in issuing different types of sukuk. And I think this will continue, and this will have built our confidence to use sukuk for further financing of the development in Indonesia. In 2013, we started issuing sukuks for a specific infrastructure project. Okay, in 2013, for the first time, we issued 800 billion IDR, Indonesian rupiah, to build a double-track rail between Cirebon and Kroya. This is two cities in West Java and Central Java. And since then, we started our issuance of sukuk for infrastructure. And in this year, we expect to issue about 13.67 trillion rupiah sukuk for infrastructure. This is about 1 billion US dollar in US dollar. So, and also the infrastructure projects that are financed by sukuk also becomes more varied. We build more railroads, we build roads, bridges, and also some buildings for dormitories for Hajj pilgrim in several cities in Indonesia. In the private sector, unfortunately, in private sector, unfortunately, the sukuk used to finance a project is not really developed yet in Indonesia. Out of all the sukuk issuance in the country, in terms of value, the sukuk issued by private sector accounts only 3.7% out of the all sukuk issuance in the country. So it's still small, and we have to wait until all other. This is it. This is in the top right. We see that the share of sukuk issuance by private sector in terms of value is still 3.7%, and while in terms of volume it's it counts quite nicely at 10 point something percent. So let me come to the end of my presentation by listing some challenges that we see for the further development of Sukuk to finance infrastructure projects in Indonesia. We can see these challenges come from 4 different perspectives. From the issuer perspective, we still see some lack of commitment and understanding in Islamic financing, and averse to risk is also a problem, as well as the low corporate rating. On the investor side, a lack of knowledge, averse to risk, and then the diversification, profit-oriented, and floating majority is also still a problem here in Indonesia. While from the market perspective, lack of instruments, low of size of issuance, liquidity in the secondary market is some of the problems that we still face. On the supporting infrastructures for the Sukuk market, of course, we still need to discuss with relevant authorities on the incentive, taxation, as well as the education on this Sukuk investment. And of course, we have some initiative to overcome or to face these challenges. You can see in the material. I will not elaborate one by one, but as you can see here, we have some initiative that we believe will be able to overcome or to face the challenges that I have listed before. So at the end of my presentation, let me conclude by saying that first, infrastructure investment is the key for our country to achieve a sustainable economic growth, and connectivity infrastructure especially will be the main focus of a national development strategy in the next few years. And structural shift from primary sector to manufacturing and services, as perhaps have been mentioned by previous speakers in the previous sessions, is the essential part of our strategy and to accelerate growth in the economy. And then Islamic financing is seen by the government to have the great potential to provide an alternative solution for our infrastructure financing. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention, and I welcome questions when the time is available for question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Isa. A very informative presentation. Now we come to the second speaker, Dato' Nuriza, to share Malaysia's experiences in issuing Sukuk to finance infrastructure project. The time is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the opportunity to share our experience in the issuance of our Sukuk. But as a start to my presentation, let me just introduce our corporate structure so that you understand where we're coming from and the activity of PLUS itself. Okay, from this corporate structure, you can see that PLUS is actually owned by UEM Group, and UEM Group eventually is actually owned by Khazanah Nasional. Khazanah Nasional is actually the government investment arm, 100% owning UEM Group. And as far as UEM is concerned, it's a big infrastructure group where the focus of the core business is actually in expressway, township and property development, engineering and construction, and also asset and facilities management. And of course, where I'm coming from, I'm from the Expressway Group, where under the Expressway Group, there's 2 companies actually. One is PLUS Expressway International Berhad, which holds all the interests in the international operations, including Indonesia. and also in Plus Malaysia Berhad, where UEM own 51%. And the balance of the 49% is actually owned by EPF, which is actually the Employee Provident Fund. Okay, this is actually the corporate structure of Plus currently. As I mentioned to you, Plus Malaysia Berhad is jointly owned by UEM and EPF 51 and 49% respectively. And under Plus Malaysia Berhad, we have the local concession companies that is actually under the Project Lebuh Raya Usaha Sama Berhad. Then we also have a new concession which is actually the operation and maintenance of Lebuh Raya Pantai Timur 2. And also the other subsidiaries, mainly Teras, that's doing the toll system, plus helicopter, because we provide helicopter services as well, apart from our use to monitor the maintenance of the highway. And also we have 20% interest in Touch and Go, which is actually the payment clearing system for the electronic toll payment. For Plus Project Lebuh Raya Usaha Sama Berhad, which I can call it short Plus, the Ministry of Finance also own one special share, which we call the Golden Share. And under Plus itself, there's actually 5 concessions, and this is actually the structure currently. Before this, Plus was actually a public listed entity with about 24,000 shareholders. But due to the issues that we wanted to restructure the toll rate, we thought that it's best that for this company to be taken private. And when we did the privatization, I think we also did the Sukuk issuance as well. Yeah, I will elaborate a bit more later. So this restructuring happened in 2011 and it was completed in early 2012. This is for some who may not know about Plus. Plus is actually one of the largest toll expressway operator in Malaysia, and also can also be said in Southeast Asia, because we own and operate more than 1,000 kilometers of highway. And we started our operation way back in 1988, so we have got about 28 years experience with us. And as you can see from the map, the Plus Highway actually is actually the backbone of the road transportation system in the country, where it connects all the major industrial, commercial, and also other transportation centers, and it also links to the major airports and the seaports in the country. And because of the strategic location of the highway, which is actually on the west coast of the highway, it actually services the states, most of the states on the west coast, and it makes up about 81% of the population of Peninsular Malaysia. And also it contributes, the states that we fly through also contribute about 89% of the GDP of the country. So you can see how the how the highway can contribute to the economic development of the country. Okay. The financing map, as everybody is quite aware, I think when we first started in 1988, when the government awarded the concession for the North-South Highway to us, I think at that point in time, financing was actually purely based on conventional loan, term loans, and also we had government support loan. And term loan, then the tenure was also quite short, 5 to 7 years. Then it evolved, and when we did the debt restructuring to prepare ourselves for IPO in 2002, we did debt restructuring, and there was actually an issuance of Plus bond. I think that was the time when bonds were actually introduced in the Malaysian market. So we introduced Plus bonds, redeemable, convertible bonds, but basically it's actually very conventional bonds, because at that time the bond market was just opening up. Then between 2002 to 2005, we refinanced because then the Islamic bonds actually came into picture. So we refinanced our existing finances through issuance of Islamic bonds according to the finance concept of buy vitamin ajil, and which also comply to the Malaysian Sharia laws. Basically, from there on, a lot of corporates in Malaysia, especially infrastructure project, started to raise financing or refinance their existing bonds and converted to Sukuk. So this is actually the migration of the conventional to Sharia compliant Sukuk in Malaysia. And for infrastructure financing in Malaysia, now it's very popular with Sukuk. So people tend to ask, why Sukuk? Nature of the transaction itself, I think it promotes good business practice. And of course, we avoid interest, which is haram in Islam. And it also avoids uncertainties, over leveraging and speculation, and it's backed by real economic activities. And the Sukuk is also gaining prominence, especially for large-scale infrastructure project, long-term, because I think it provides very stable cash flow, so it enables us to issue Sukuk for the long-term infrastructure project. And also, as far as Sukuk issuance is concerned, it has a greater governance and transparency. And of course, with that, it also promotes fairness and ethical practices. As far as investor base is concerned, with the issuance of Sukuk, it also provides a wider investor base because both conventional and Islamic investors can actually subscribe to the Sukuk. And as far as financing is concerned, it's also very competitive if you compare with bonds. And if the Sukuk has actually gained strong demand, then you can actually get better pricing for the Sukuk. And in Malaysia, there's also a special tax incentive because the government wants to promote the issuance of Sukuk. So when we issued our Sukuk, we actually had tax deduction for all fees that we incur for the restructuring and also the issuance of the Sukuk. Okay, as I mentioned to you just now, we issued the Sukuk because we actually did the privatization. So when we actually did the privatization, we had to buy out the shares that's held by all the investors. And at that time, Plus was actually privatized at a total value of 23 billion. And at the exchange rate, at the end, 20 billion ringgit, based on the exchange rate at that time, it converts to about 7.5 billion US dollars. So it's quite a huge privatization exercise. And this follows from the offer from the UEM Group and EPF to actually buy over and privatize the company. So as I mentioned to you just now, the need to go through the privatization exercise because there was a need to rationalize the overall toll rate structure for all the concessions under the Plus Group. And with this, and we did this initiative because we wanted to make a difference because Plus actually own about 60% of the toll highway in the country. So because of the complexity and the high profile of the transaction, it was pertinent for us to ensure that all shareholders' interests or stakeholders' interests were protected, be it the user of the highway, the lenders, the government, the lenders, and also the shareholders of the company. So when it comes to bondholders and shareholders, we have to make sure that the rights of the existing bondholders were protected. And for the shareholders, we have to ensure that they are given a fair exit price for the existing shareholders. And of course, for the shareholders that remain, that actually took the company private, they also have to ensure that they will have acceptable returns on investment. And as I mentioned to you, one of the biggest investor here is actually EPF. Before that, they only own about 12% of the equity in the company. With the privatization, they increased their stake from 12% to 49% because they see the company with a long-term view, as one of the speakers mentioned earlier. Yeah, even though because the company has a profile of steady cash flow and with a long-term concession, so this fits very well with the requirements and the profile of our existing investor, which is UEM and EPF. As I mentioned to you just now, because of the size of the Sukuk issuance, this is actually a landmark Sukuk issuance as part of the privatization exercise. The program that we introduced with this exercise, we introduced two types of program, which is the Islamic medium term notes, Sukuk, which is actually the tenure is between 5 to 25 years. And the profit rate ranges from 3.9 to 5.75%, depending on the tenure of the tranches. And on the average, I would say that for this particular 19.6 billion Sukuk, the average profit was about 5.02%. And the other one was the Islamic MTN program, which is actually government guaranteed. So this government guaranteed Sukuk, the tenure was even longer, between 26 to 27 years. And the profit rate ranges from 4.86 to 5%, or on the average about 4.93%. So based on that, the total issuance of this Sukuk of about 30.6 billion, which at that time, based on the conversion rate at that time, is equivalent to almost 10 billion US dollar. The profit rate was 4.9898. So it's a very attractive rate as far as we are concerned. And in order for us to get this attractive pricing, of course, it has to achieve very good rating. So we had our Sukuk rated by Malaysia Rating Corporation Berhad, Mark, which rated our Sukuk as a AAA Sukuk, AAA paper. So this reflects the strong credit quality and the quality of the transaction and the strength of Plus. And of course, our principal advisor and lead arranger was CIMB Investment. And we also had 4 joint lead managers, which are the 4 local largest banks. Okay. As far as the significance of our deal, the Plus deal, as I mentioned to you just now, as of the date when we did the restructuring in 2011, that was actually the largest privatization transaction in the corporate Malaysia, and which was 23 billion ringgit. And the Plus Group's issuance also, the size of the issue of our Sukuk, which was actually fully subscribed locally, and we also issued in ringgit because our revenue is in ringgit. So this reflects the size and also the liquidity of the Malaysian debt capital market. Yeah, and Sukuk also generated very robust interest amongst investors. And as I mentioned to you just now, the size of the issue was very big, and also the tenure was also quite long, relatively long compared to what the others are actually issuing, 27 years because of our long concession period. The Sukuk issuance, our Sukuk issuance has also gained many firsts, including the single largest bond issuance in Malaysia even up to date, single largest ringgit denominated Sukuk issuance to date, and also single largest Sukuk issuance globally in any currency at that time. I'm not sure whether we still hold that record, but at that time it was actually the largest Sukuk issuance globally. Okay. Of course, there were challenges and there were many considerations that we actually took into consideration when we actually wanted to issue out this Sukuk. As far as the market and the stakeholders are concerned, we have to ensure that there is actually a balance and a win-win solution for all stakeholders involved. And as I mentioned, because the issue is very large, 30.6 billion or equivalent to about 10 billion US dollar. And also because the financing tenure was actually 27 years, because this is actually something like refinancing, because our cash flow is already very predictable and our